Hello from Iloilo Museum of Contemporary Art. We would like to share with you our latest project titled Timplada. Timplada, the art of Ilonggo cuisine, is created to support Iloilo City's application to the UNESCO Creative Cities for Gastronomy. This is composed of an art exhibition at Hulot Gallery in ILOMOCA, a series of online educational programs called Merienda Talks, and lastly, an Iloilo City food map. This Merienda Talk is sponsored by National Commission for Culture and the Arts, Ortigas Foundation Library, Iloilo Business Park, Festive Walk Iloilo, Food Writers Association of the Philippines, and their project, the Doreen Fernandez Annual Food Writing Award, Our Awesome Planet, and Kaon Ta Iloilo. Hello everyone, I'm Janine, and I will be your host for today's talk on Doreen Fernandez and Ilonggo Cuisine. First off, we would like to ask everyone if you have a specific favorite Ilonggo dish. We would like to see it in our comment section below. There's a lot to choose from. There's actually bachoy, pansit molo. We have KBL, tinuom, and of course, chicken inasal. So let us know what your favorite Ilonggo dishes are or dish. Just to give context to our talk today, I will give you a brief background on Doreen Fernandez. This is taken from her book, Tikim. I will read a brief bio on who Doreen Fernandez is. She was a prodigious writer and editor, a literary scholar, cultural historian, and a much beloved teacher of more than 30 years. She was a teacher when I was in college for creative writing. Her research has been on cultural, literary, theater, and culinary history, on which she has written for scholarly and popular publications. Her weekly column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, titled In Good Taste, ran for 16 years and has a very wide following. In 1999, she was among the honorees of CCP Centennial Honors for the Arts, recognizing 100 Filipinos who helped shape the arts in the Philippines and in the last century. Our speaker for today is a very good friend of Doreen, and he's also a fellow foodie, John Silva. John heads the Ortigas Library, which holds a specialized collection of Filipiniana books, maps, prints, documents, and memorabilia from the 17th century to the present. He was a former senior consultant to the National Museum of the Philippines and is also on the board of directors of the Synergia Foundation, as well as the Manila Symphony Orchestra. John is an author and contributor to the local and international publications on history and culture. John is very happy to do this talk because he is also from Iloilo. Welcome to our Merienda Talk, Sir John.
Hello.
Welcome to our Merienda Talk, Sir John. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you too. So, hello to everyone. I can't see you, but I hope you see me. And I think the organizers thought that my discussion on Ilonggo food and cuisine might be of no consequences because I'm not of great importance. So you add an icon like Doreen Fernandez, and I think there'll be a lot more people interested. So I'm very happy that Doreen got included. And I also happened to, when looking and preparing for this, look back and realize that I did have a fairly long friendship with Doreen. And so I now am beginning to I figured out the convergence between Doreen and my love for Ilonggo cuisine and my love for food in general and how that developed. So to start off, I wanted to prove to all of our Iloilo viewers and Ilonggo viewers of my pedigree. So I have to show you that I really do come from Iloilo. And so I'll start off with that. And oops. So this is my great grandparents, my great grandmother, Florentina Ledesma, and my great grandfather, Julio Ledesma. This is my great grandparents on my mother's side, Julio Javillana and Sofia Halandoni. They were all from Iloilo. Julio and Sofia were from Haro, Iloilo. This is the home of Julio Javillana, who which is now called the Marikit House because one of his children was Marikit Lopez, and was a half sister to my Lola Magdalena, and the house is still beautifully taken care of. And if anybody goes to Haro, you should make a point of visiting it. I know it's open to the public. This is Haro Cathedral with the belfry across the street. I think this was a time already when people knew that belfries fall on churches during earthquakes, so they made sure that it was far away. I have a question to ask my viewers. Why is it, and you can answer later, why is it that there's a bamboo construction of the Eiffel Tower? It seems rather strange, but so it is. So maybe you should let me know why you think there was such in those days. This is a niche in the Haro Cathedral of the Familia Julio Javillana. On the right side is that of my great grandmother, Sofia Halandoni Javillana, and I suspect the man, what's his name, Maximo Halandoni, must have been her father, I think. My grandmother, Magdalena Javillana, on the center front, and my grandfather, Juan de Desma, on the right. Um, they were still in courtship. This is on a trip that they went around the world in 1926, and Juan Ledesma, family legend, is that he was told to join the trip so as to court Magdalena Javillana. I don't know whether that's true or not, but nonetheless, by the 8th month or 7th month of their trip, somewhere in Italy, they were much in love, and then in April of the next year, they were married. That's my grandfather, and this is the ship that they took, the Julio Cesare or Julius Caesar, from Brazil to Geneva, and I think at this point he had fallen in love with ships because they've been on ships all over. And years later, after they got married, he decided with his father to set up a shipping company, and it was later called Negros Navigation. That's why the names of the ships in the first part of the first 10 years were that of my great, like the Doña Florentina and the Don Juan and the Don Julio. All of them were my grandparents and great grandparents. That's my grandmother and her and Juan de Desma standing, the marriage picture. So my mother is the daughter, and she eventually meets up with this young man, Saturnino Silva, and she was in the States studying. He was just finished World War II and was a war hero. She fell in love with him. 2 days later, they were married. My grandparents were horrified because of the fact that he was not Ilonggo, he was Ilocano. But my mother persisted and said, "No, this is the man I love." I was born, and I won't tell you the date, but and that's my yaya, Iyai. And Iyai's name was Iyai, was because of the fact that when I was growing up, I had this old McDonald's song on the record player that I kept playing incessantly. and it will always end with EIEIO, and so she somehow managed to get the name. I was born in St. Paul's Hospital in Iloilo. This is the very, very first photograph of a finished St. Paul's. So, but now, should you pass by it, it's lots of trees and lots more shrubbery and a little bit more aged. But this is where I was born, on General Luna, I think. This is where I grew up, in this houseboat, they called it. It was an Art Deco streamlined house uh, um, designed by Pablo Ocampo, one of our architects. And it was right beside the Iloilo River, and also fronted General Luna. We don't have it anymore. It got sold eventually. Here I am in the middle in the white t-shirt with our yaya. We were all seated on her. That's my sister, me, and then two boys who are the children of our driver, George and Oscar, who are who I still know for now. And that behind us is Guimaras, the island of Guimaras. And so this is Villa Beach. And Villa Beach is very famous for some of the seafood restaurants that we all go to today. That's my grandfather, Juan de Desma, eventually looking very old, not old, but middle-aged. And I think that he had a profound effect on me. We stayed with Lolo for many years, Lolo and Lola, and I checked out his eating habits, and I knew that he loved soupy food, which eventually I learned to love soupy food. Soupy meaning kanse for one. Kanse was like our bulalo, but it had the addition of jackfruit, but it was certainly very soupy. I really love this one. Another one that I loved was, of course, the chicken the chicken with the coconut. Um, that was just really a favorite of mine too, because it was very sweet. Binakol. In this picture, which I just picked up from the internet, it shows the food being put in a coconut husk, which is not what we usually do. This is sort of the kind of resort kind of food preparation or presentation. But binakol was very sweet, and I loved sweet food, sweet and soupy food. Years later, I took a passion for making soups, and I've been doing soups, and I've been posting it on Facebook, and I have all kinds of soups, and people have told me to make um, cookbook of soups, and I've been thinking about it. So this is one of my concoctions of a beet soup with olive oil droplets on it. Very good. One of my first remembrances of my lolo taking me to and introducing me to most incredible food that I also then one of my international foods that I love dearly was we were in Negros in San Carlos and for the summer, and there was a Japanese ship that arrived in the port of San Carlos, and it started to load up with molasses. And my grandfather was invited to eat in the ship and and be feted with a Japanese dinner. So he took me along, and I remember the ship to be very clean and gleaming brushed steel, burnished steel, just absolutely impeccably clean. And inside the ship was a woman, a geisha. First time I've ever seen somebody as beautifully dressed as this, preparing the meal for us. And this was my first introduction to sukiyaki. I totally loved it because it was sweet and it was stewy and soupy. Um, I liked a lot of stuff in it, except for maybe a couple of veggies there. But for the most part, I loved sukiyaki. That was and continues to be and still is forevermore my favorite international food. Aha! Then we were presented with sushi. The sushi was a little bit harder to do. I was a little. I found it a little strange. The taste was a little weird, but eventually, and now I'm totally hooked to sushi. And again, at the age of 7 or so, to be introduced to these foods by my lolo was uh, was really it had such an impression on me, a very deep impression. This is the only idealized picture I could find of mine of Tia Soling. Tia Soling was our family cook. This is, of course, the most gorgeous version of Tia Soling. The only reason why I chose this picture, I think this is by Amor Solo, is that she is wearing the barot saya, which is exactly what Tia Soling was wearing um, every day when she made dinner and lunches and nothing else. She never wore anything else but barot saya. She was less beautiful than that, but she was certainly well dressed as in barot saya. This was now the family um, in the 50s. This we had a house, or my grandfather had a house in Libertad, and behind would be facing the boulevard, Ross Boulevard, and in front of the picture would be a huge dining table that could hold 16 to 20 people. And as you can see, I am the one in the front, a boy in white, um, and then my grandparents behind me, and then my mother on the, I think, right side, seated with my sister, and my father behind my tita Cora, who is to the right of my mother, and all the rest is my tita Nene, my tita Eddie, my tita George, my tita Chris below seated, tita Tessie, and my Lola and Lolo, and then several other more cousins um, all around. We always had, oh, this was another birthday for John Silva, who's here dressed up as a soldier. We always had food, lots of food, lots of birthdays, and I think that the yayas and the drivers and the household help, I think, got fat in our house because there was never a lack of food in our house, and there was always an occasion to celebrate anything, including my birthday. Now let's move on to Doreen. So how I got to meet Doreen was she writes me a letter in the 1980s saying that she would like to publish an excerpt from a thesis that I did on pre-Spanish same-sex relations, and I said sure, and that was the start of the correspondence. And from then on, we'd write to each other, and I found out that she, and this is before she was a foodie, or at least known to be the foodie, she did a lot more theatrical books on theater, and especially 19th century theater and early 20th century theater. So I I read them, and I was impressed by them. She was a really incredible writer, and so I offered one time to give her prints and photographs of 19th century theatrical presentations of usually it's the king and the queen of a particular kingdom. And this one I remember was that of somewhere in the Ilocos. And she was quite happy. I just found it in one of those antique shops in the United States. And so she offered to buy it. I said, no, no, no. You could, I think you'd enjoy it more than I would. So, or at least this would be of help to you. So I gave it to her. The other thing that I gave to her was I remember coming across a typewritten manuscript called Walang Sugat by Severino Reyes. And again, I offered that to her, and she was like amazed. I said, I just found it again. And she offered, and I said, no, you can have it. It's for your studies. Before I get into more of the food stuff, when we became closer and closer and became good friends, um, she invited me or persuaded me or pushed me to try and read the works of Ramon Muzones, who was an Iloilo writer and who later on became our national artist. Um, and so this was the book called Margot sa Tubig, and then the story of Salagundi. It was I said, okay, I'll read it. And then she says, but read it in Hiligaynon. I said, Doreen, I don't think I can do that. My Ilonggo is rusty. I've been away so long. I don't think there's just no way I could really read it all in Hiligaynon. So every time I'd see her, she'd look at me and say, "Well, have you read it?" And I say, "No." And then I'd give her again the usual story of like, "I just can't. I don't know. I don't think I can handle it." I felt like I was becoming one of her students, and she was getting persistent. So then one afternoon on one of our dates, she offers me the book, and she says, "Look, here's a book on by Muzones in Hiligaynon, and I would like you to read it out loud." I said, "Okay, I'll try." So I did. And the funny thing was that the first few paragraphs was very uncomfortable. I just didn't know how to go through the sentences properly. Everything was so strange. But by the 10th or 11th paragraph, it started to come back to me. I could start to hear the words have a sense of reality. I could remember what the words meant. I could I could sense that I was saying the words properly because I was reading it out loud. And then what was the most incredible was that I was in the I remember as a child in the afternoons the radio would be going on in the place of the servants, loud, not loud, but you could hear it. It was, and there were usually um, epic dramas in Hiligaynon of some king and queen and some empire and some fighting going on. And I remember I would be hearing that almost every day, and I didn't realize I internalized it. And so when I started to speak the words in Ilagaynon and loudly, I began to get a real sense of the story. And I began to, my Hiligaynon or my Ilonggo background came back. It was incredible. So I have a lot to thank her for sort of reintroducing me to this beautiful language of ours. One of my first books, I think, that I really got turned on to was Sarap, her essays on Philippine food. And of course, thereafter, there were many more and many more and many more. And there were just many, many, many more. So, and they're all available still. So I'd really encourage you to go and take a look at these books. If you can't, and when our library opens up, we have these books in our Ortigas library for you to read at your leisure. When Doreen would visit me in the United States, I lived in Berkeley. Uh, this was our favorite hangout place where I would take her for lunch. It was called the Greens Restaurant, which had a beautiful view of the marina and the Golden Gate Bridge beyond. And it was one of the first vegetarian restaurants, I guess, in the United States. And I always made sure that I got the best table right by the window so that we could just take a look and enjoy the view and just chatter away and talk stories. And the food, well, both of us would sort of grin and smile and find it all amusing because much of it is all kale and broccoli and carrots and cucumbers and um, brown rice and all sorts of things, which we all sort of like in those days in the 80s. It was still all very novel to us, but we wanted to try it. They were all very good, actually, but they were not aesthetically pleasing to the eye because they were sort of mushy or sort of too green for our taste, I guess, or to our looks. But when it came to desserts, she was she made no. There were no stepping back. She ordered a real good chocolate decadent cake. It was just par for the course for her. But when she did, and she did, she'd always make sure that she had this, her insulin injection shot just before she ate something that was kind of sweet and over the top. And I would sort of always like, oh, you can look around, look away, and look at out the window. But she just did her thing and just pulled out the shirt a little bit and stabbed it into her stomach, and then she was happy. She could go and eat what she wanted. One time, she brought her mother along, who she was also a doctor, and I took them around, and I remember the doctor was so funny. She When I picked them up at the airport, and I grabbed their luggage and put them in the car, the doctor said, "Bao, Doreen, Inday, ini ang apo ni Don Juan, nagadala sang atong karga, no ni man, blah, blah, blah." It was like, oh my God, she was like freaking out. And both Doreen and I laughed and laughed, and it was sort of that old school thinking. But she was very sweet, very, very sweet. One time, we were on the same flight back going to Manila, and she had bought 40 pounds of cheese for her husband, Willie. So I offered to carry it, and I sort of regretted it because it was the heaviest load I have ever carried on board. And I'm glad that there was no, it was a nonstop flight, but it was pretty heavy. But she was totally devoted to Willie, who was also a foodie and had to make sure that he was taken care of while she was away. And so this was always her pasalubong. I think several more things about Doreen. I think there are two things that I learned from not all, I'm sorry, most of, or not much of Doreen's writings, is that this is a picture by Amor Solo. The foreign colonizers or the foreigners are coming, the Spaniards. There's food here that's being prepared or at least being handled by the natives. She was never a purist. She always believed that first start off with taste. What does the food taste like? And then what are its ingredients? And then where did it come from, if ever? And then it always ends with this sort of like, well, that's us, we Filipinos. We have all of this influences, the Arabs, the Indians, the Spanish, the Chinese, the Americans, all of them had contributed to what we are eating today and what we're enjoying today. And that's that. It was nothing, it wasn't anything puristic. There was one time in a food conference, I remember, um, Claude Tayag, who was giving a talk, was questioned by a Filipino from the United States, actually, who said, why don't we have measurements for adobo? We should have everything measured for adobo, or else it's not adobo. So there was a lot of nervous laughter, and of course, especially Mr. Tayab, who thought that that was such a weird question, and he said, in our country, every house has their version of adobo. And in that house, every member who cooks adobo have their own version of, of adobo. So it's the whole idea of trying to get the a standardized recipe of adobo was just ridiculous, just very hard to do. The second thing I think I learned from Doreen's works was that we were very sure of ourselves in terms of what it is we ate, and that whenever whatever came to us from abroad, uh, we adapted and we made it our own. For example, the papaya tree, it turns out, is from South America, but papaya has now been used in so many things in our dishes, including the manok, the manok with the coconut, and various other things, the unripe ones. As you can see, the banana is the only indigenous thing. The pineapple comes from the Americas. So many things we just sort of put together, and it never really bothered the basic part of our cooking, the basic taste of our cooking. It just maybe added to the taste of our cooking. Doreen had this column for many years in the Inquirer, and before that, she had a column in the Manila Chronicle called "Put Ouf Utofu." It's really hard French, um, and then later on she moved to the Inquirer. This, in fact, actually is a her last um, her last column before she went to the States, um, and was sick there and died. Um, she gave a couple of her columns to the Inquirer just to be sure, as she always does. She's always prepared. So this one is about dumplings. It's it would be her last article. She would always, I think, end her sense of when she'd talk about food and review food, and it was it the academic part, there was some, but I think it always was the last paragraph was the emotional part, which I think I really liked very much, because she would say things like, well, then go to it, then you inhale the aroma of the food, you sip the broth, which to me is like the broth of, I think, like the soupy soups of the Ilongos, and the power and the grace. That was what always was the best part of her essays, was when she would get ethereal and always posit the good, and it's always you get a sense that she smiles, and she does. I've never seen her frown. She was always a smiling person, and I remember every time we would eat, she would go into this sort of late girlish, I don't want to be insulting, but it's a girl like attitude, where she'd scrunch her body, and she'd say, namits. And I'd say, yeah, that's right. There's namits. And that also reminded me of my mother. My mother was like that. She was also like into this I think giggle. It was this giggle mode of just enjoying. So just enjoying with a passion what she's just eaten. Let me tell you my last story, which is a poignant story. It was 1998 or 99, and Willie, her husband, just passed away. And it was, we all sent our condolences and things. And 2 weeks later, I get a call from her say, "Come, let's have lunch." I said, "Oh, okay. I hope you're okay." And she said, "Let's meet at this favorite French restaurant of Willie, the one Le Souffle, the one that was in Greenbelt, and we got a table that was right beside the window, which had a beautiful view of the trees." And so then we were given our menus, and I was looking at my menu, and she said, "Let me order for you." I said, "Okay." Um, so she tells the waiter, "I'd like to get onion soup." That's what you see. Nice big salad, um, and a tenderloin, beef tenderloin. So okay, I certainly like the selection, and I first started with my soup, and then I was going through it, and I noticed that um, Doreen took extra notice of me. Um, and then asked for my reactions. And I said, "Oh, well, this soup is very good. It had this and that and everything else." I don't remember now exactly, but she started writing, as she always does. She always has copious. She always has a pen and her notebook right beside her little notebook. And then she asked about the salad, and I said, "Oh, the salad was good. I like the dressing." And she starts writing about it. She looks at me, and then the tenderloin, and I said, and I was munching away, and she says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, it was I like it. It was nice. Uh, it was tender. It was a beautiful, still medium rare, and I like the sauce, the caper sauce, and the mushrooms. Just very good, very good." So she wrote this all down, and then she just looked out the window, and she for a while, and then she looked at me and she says, "These were the last three dishes ordered by Willie and and sent to our house for his for the meal, the last meal." And so I never got to know what his reaction was, and so I never got to write a review of this. So I want you to know, now I know. Now I know what he tasted before he died. And I'm so thankful to you. So I said, "Oh, okay." That was an incredible experience, but that was Doreen's way. I think that's it. I forgot to put the end.
Thank you, Sir John. We have a question for you
All right.
from Maritel because you were mentioning something about your soup recipes. She's asking, when do you plan to have your recipe book published?
God. Um, the, the way it's going, I better do something about it before people really give up on me. So maybe before Christmas, because it's all bound up already, manuscript. pictures included. It just has to go to the press. But I've been so busy with our library. We built a new library, and then this pandemic, and everything just gets so it just gets so interrupted. But I will resolve to have that thing done by the end of this year.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all your memories with Doreen. I also have some personal memories about her in class, and uh, during that time, she already was in a wheelchair.
Ah,
But all we did in her class was just write, and write some more. So by the end of the semester, we were able to do it was more than 20 essays
wow.
that she had to check. We had to read it in class. So there. A lot
Well,
of people in the comment section were also sharing a bit of memories about Doreen.
how
We
nice.
have another question from Maritel. What
Oh,
is your favorite Ilonggo dish?
I guess it would be uh, if it was because of my remembrance of childhood, then it would have to be the chicken binakol. I think that's number one up there because it's whenever I just taste a bit of the soup and start diving into the flesh of the coconut and a little bit of the chicken, it brings back immediately. I can see my grandfather in front of me sipping away with his soup. I can see Tia Soling looking very excited whether or not we like the soup. I can see my cousins, and I can see my family. I can see my parents in this huge table. It really gives me that picture again of how life was when I was young. So it's chicken binakol.
That's great. A lot of people have also, so we have Tita Feliz that's watching, and also Rina Gamboa. We're also going to have a talk with Rina Gamboa this November 27 for those who
Great,
are watching.
great.
We can't wait to meet you. And for our next part, Sir John, we will be inviting everyone to this annual project of Food Writers Association of the Philippines.
Yes.
It's the Doreen Gamboa Fernandez Food Writing Award for 2021. So our topic is shellfish.
Oh,
This
okay.
is this is an 800-word English language essay. Please submit using a pen name. We have here the deadline, which is the 30th of November. And the email is dgfawards@yahoo.com.ph.
Great.
For more information, we have the criteria in 50% for content, research is 30%, style is at 20%. The author is only allowed to have 2 entries. So for inquiries, please ask this at pinoyfood04@yahoo.com. Thank you again, Sir John, for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you.
I will also be sharing to everyone our latest October schedules for Merienda Talks. We have for our Museums and Galleries Month. This is on October 2, Karununod and Millennials, getting them on board. This is actually a food mapping practice created by, the speaker is one of the winners of the DGF Food Writing Awards. It's Professor Mary Joy Sumagaysay of University of the Philippines, Visayas. We will be cross-posting this with Vibal and all our other sponsorship partners. And on October 9, this is going to be fun. It's not going to be a talk technically. It's going to be a fun trivia game where it will automatically show the answers, and also at the same time, we will be having winners and, of course, prizes that we'll be giving away. So please join us October 2, October 9, and for October 16, Pangyam is, which means desserts. This is together with DOT Region 6 and the Iloilo Provincial Government. Gilbert Marine will be speaking. Thank you again for joining us for this Merienda Talks. Please don't forget to subscribe to Museums Matter. And this is our YouTube channel. And at the same time, don't forget to follow us here at ILOMOCA on our Facebook page. Thank you, everyone. Happy weekend.